The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once said that all truths go through three stages. First, it is ridiculed, then it is violently opposed, and then it is seen as self-evident. Now, we've seen this throughout history. Let's go back 100 years ago. The idea that women deserved rights was seen as absurd. It was ridiculed. Then it was violently opposed by men at the suffragette protests. And now women's rights are seen as self-evident. Let's go back 200 years ago. The idea that black people deserved the right to freedom was seen as absurd. It was ridiculed. And then it was violently opposed. We had an entire civil war over the issue of slavery. And now anti-slavery is seen as self-evident. Now we realize that our ancestors had irrational moral blind spots towards certain groups of individuals. And of course, we look back in shame. Well, this is all obvious and common knowledge, but where am I going with this? Well, throughout history, there has been one phrase used to describe how victims were treated. And that phrase is, they were treated like animals. Now, it may not seem like much, but the reason this phrase is interesting is because we realize that to treat someone like an animal is to treat them harshly, violently, and unfairly. So the question is, if we realize that, why are we okay with treating animals like animals, harshly, violently, unfairly? Now, I should point out that when I say animals, I don't mean dogs and cats. Because if we threw millions of dogs and cats inside of a gas chamber, everyone would lose their minds. It would be considered animal cruelty. There would be a national outrage. There would be protests on the street. But here's a little fact, not my opinion or a hot take, but a fact. Right now in the UK, millions of pigs are thrown into gas chambers, alive, where they suffocate to death, carbon dioxide gas chambers, which burns the insides of their throats. And for what? So we can use their corpse as a sandwich filling, or as we'd like to euphemize it, as bacon. Here's another fact. Mammals only produce milk when they're pregnant, and cows are no exception. So in order for a cow to produce milk, she has to be forcibly impregnated by humans. And then when she finally gives birth to a baby, that baby wants to drink his mother's milk. We can't have that happening because we want to drink his mother's milk. So what do? Well, we separate the mother and baby, which causes the mother immense trauma because cows are very maternal animals. We kill the baby for veal, another euphemism, and then we repeat the process 5 times, till the mother's milk is run dry. And then what's the thanks we give her? We send her to a slaughterhouse, of course. And it doesn't end there. In the egg industry, male chicks are thrown into a giant blender on the first day of life because they don't lay eggs, unlike their female counterparts who spend their entire life caged and they're genetically modified to produce 15 times more eggs than they naturally would, which takes an immense toll on their bodies. And what's the thanks we give them for that? Well, slaughterhouse, of course. And I can go on and on about the atrocities that happen to animals. The worst part is that it's not even a necessary evil. It's a completely unnecessary evil. We don't need to exploit animals for any protein, calcium, vitamins, nutrients, or minerals. We can get them elsewhere. Rather, we do it for taste pleasure. Now, of course, I know they taste good. Who can deny that? But since when has taste pleasure mattered more than the life and suffering of someone else? Now, you might be thinking, well, what can I, as an individual, do about this? How can I stop this? And some people would like to reply, well, buy humane meat, or humane eggs, or humane dairy. Humane meat? What does the word humane actually mean to you? Do you think anything humane happens inside a slaughterhouse? The word humane means to show compassion and benevolence. So I'd like to ask you, how can you compassionately kill an animal who does not want to die and does not have to die? The solution is simple, and you may not like it, but it is to live vegan. When we live vegan, we are actively opposing the exploitation and bloodbath of animals 3 times a day, every single meal. Because I hate to say it, but these industries only exist because you demand it. That's the reality of it. That's the economics of it. Supply and demand. We buy, they die. And the less we demand these products, the closer we can move to an existence where slaughterhouses are non-existent. And ethics aside, does anyone here want another pandemic? I certainly don't. And factory farms and slaughterhouses are breeding grounds for pandemics. If we keep exploiting animals, COVID-19 is just a dress rehearsal. And I don't even have time to go onto the climate change and the animal agriculture has on the environment, the impacts. 86% of greenhouse gases from animal agriculture, according to a recent study. If you remember how I started this speech, I talked about injustices that were seen as okay during their time, but are seen as unacceptable now. What I'm asking you today is to consider what side of history do you want to be on? Because as we've seen, none of these injustices last forever. There will come a time when we look back at how we treated non-human animals and say, wow, what were we thinking? And I think I know which side of history all of you want to be on, because I honestly do believe that most people are good people. But like our ancestors, we just have moral blind spots. But we can do better. I know we can do better. Thank you.